Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Still Rose's podcast. This podcast is created for women by women to elevate women's voices. As you can hear in my voice, I am a little under the weather. So when I last recorded and my last episode, it was before July 4th, and I had, noted it was going to be July 4th week, and we were having guests, and, thus I didn't know that a second episode was going to come out. And that's basically exactly what happened. We got guests earlier than we had anticipated, which kind of shifted my schedule a little bit. It was super fun holiday. It was, very family focused, just hanging out at home with everybody. But, I never realized how much work it is when you're hosting or when you have people over. I think back and reflect on when we would go to holidays at, my Aunt Michelle's house and Uncle David's house. Shout out to them. Huge shout out to them for hosting all these holidays. My Aunt Christy for hosting holidays, because it's a tremendous amount of work for the host. Because not only do you need to, and I mean, you all know this, like if you've hosted something at your house with your family, you are managing food service essentially, because you want to make sure that like, not only are you most likely cooking food, but making sure the food is out and prepared and ready for people to, eat at appropriate times. And then you're also rotating food. So like, when, we have folks sleep over, like your breakfast, rotate breakfast out. What time is lunch hitting? Rotating lunch out. In my case, we had a lot of little kids. I have my kids and then my nieces and nephews and my grandkids and everybody. So we had snack time too, so it's quite a bit of work and labor on the hosts of the gathering. This year, I if you listen to the last episode, you know that I was scaling back on my level of involvement in terms of cooking. So I catered the lunch, but it was so funny because in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm catering it. Like, this is great. I'm not going to have to do anything. And the food got there for lunch and it was fine. And everything went, like everything got eaten. That was just lunch. That was just lunch. And it literally only lasted lunch. And then I immediately had to think to myself, like, oh, wow, wait, we have all these people here. We need dinner and we need to make sure that people have food for dinner. So it was quite a bit of work, even when I was trying to mindfully not make it a lot of work. I will say this, I was actually able to relax a little bit. But I mean, not relax, spend quality time with folks this year. In prior years when we've hosted gatherings, like I would be in the kitchen the entire time, kind of pissed off, to be honest with you, that I was sitting in the kitchen the whole time and couldn't even enjoy myself. So this time was much nicer. And, then I had the benefit of being able to watch my grandkids for a few days, which was exhausting because they're little. So my big grandson is 4 and my little grandson is 2. And they are like a bundle of little joy, but at the same time, having them around and having that reminder of what it is to have small children in your home really made me greatly appreciate my kids, because they've come so far and they've grown so much and they're very self-sufficient little people and very opinionated people. But, that's how we want them. We want them to be opinionated and self-sufficient. So it was good. Good vibes all around. I honestly, as much as I'm annoyed that I'm sick again, as much as I'm annoyed about that, I can't say that any of this was bad. It was all good. And honestly, it was all worth it. It really was. So I hope all of you had a good holiday break. I hope no one else got sick. Unfortunately, my household is suffering a little. But on the note of family, I did start thinking through, and I saw some stuff online, so I'm going to read it to you as like sort of the thought starters for today's episode. So one thing that I saw that I wanted to put out there to all of you as a thought starter is your child is not annoying. You're just annoyed. And then the post that I saw goes on to say, your child is not making you mad. You're triggered by their behavior. Your child is not spoiled. They need more consistent boundaries from you. Your child is not crying for no reason. You're just lacking empathy in the moment. Disciplining kids begins with disciplining our own thoughts and perception. When you let your emotions control your actions, that is a lack of discipline in itself. Don't discipline based on your patience level. Discipline based on what skills your child is lacking in the moment. When you master the art of perception, parenting is much less triggering. I have massive triggers with my kids, massive. And I'm aware. I'm very aware. And I actually tell them about it. Case in point, my son loves to bother his sisters. He loves it. He enjoys it. He loves getting a rise out of them. He likes to annoy them. He likes to one of my girls. He has 2 nicknames that he calls her, and she hates it. And she has asked him repeatedly to stop. I've asked him to stop, and he just every once in a while decides, like, today's the day I'm going to be calling her these nicknames all day, and she hates it, and it annoys me, and it triggers me because there's so many things that he does that reminds me of my older brother when he used to bother me. And it's almost like little Jenny is responding and yelling at him and fighting with him and getting mad at him. The reality of the situation is he's a kid, and yes, brothers and sisters bother each other. Like it is what it is, but it really like triggers the shit out of me because my older brother used to tease me relentlessly, and my parents very rarely intervened. And it always stuck with me, like that they never intervened. And I was kind of at his mercy for a really long time. So I will overextend in that area. And if he's bothering them, like I jump in immediately almost sometimes. And I'm like, you need to stop. You're annoying me. Does it help? Not always, actually very rarely, but there's a large part of me that like I have this understanding that he's a brother and siblings bother each other, but I also want my kids to always know like I am watching and I'm always going to intervene on your behalf. That's really the big thing for me. I want them to see that mom is here and I'm watching, and I'm not going to let someone get you to the point of like you're crying and in tears, because that's what used to happen to me. So to me, it's more of I need to show them that I am here for them and that I'm trying to help as much as I can, to a certain extent. Now, there's some times where I hear my kids arguing with each other, and my husband and I will be downstairs and we'll hear them upstairs, and we'll pause whatever we're doing and we both will listen and see if they can work it out on their own. It doesn't always work, but we do want them to be able to resolve conflicts on their own. So that's always an important point too, that we are aware of, because there has to come a point of like logic, as they get older, where they are the ones who are regulating this, and they're the ones who are saying like, yeah, all right, we're having a conflict here, but let's talk it out. So we do try to let that happen as well. Again, it's like touch and go. Now, this brings me, actually, let me make a note there. So I have this tendency, and I'm curious, you guys can message me in wherever you're listening to the podcast. There is a link in the description. I'm going to just look really quickly to see what the actual link says, but there's a link in the description of the podcast that allows you to message me directly. I think it might even say message me. Let me see if I can find it. So I want to ask you guys about what your opinions are with like a kind of phrasing that you use as women. So I have a tendency to say kind of, or similar. Like I kind of soften. I have a tendency to soften my language. So instead of saying I am doing this, I'll say, I'm thinking of doing this. I feel that this is a good path. I will not make it a declarative sentence. It'll be a softer declarative sentence. And I'm trying to get out of the habit of that. I notice it more so professionally when I'm presenting and I am presenting a plan. I'll say kind of like this, or, and I'm good at presenting. I am, toot my own horn here, but I am good at presenting. But I have this tendency to soften my language and I'm not very declarative. So I don't know if it's like a me personally thing or if it's like if other women are noticing this about themselves as well, because it's just a way that we've learned to be assertive without being assertive. Maybe that's me thinking me, but message me, because in the description of the podcast, it literally says, send us a text message. That's going to go right to me. Like, I encourage you guys to message me. I would love to hear from you, because this is something that I notice so much in myself. So I wanted to bring it up to you, this language thing that I do. I'm trying really hard to say, this is what it is, versus like, I think this might be what it is. Please don't hate me. Like that kind of thing. I'm working on it. Okay. So transitioning to this other post that I saw, it says, someday your kids are going to figure you out. I promise you they will. The type of parent you are, the type of spouse you are, how you treat other people, how much effort you put into them. You're either going to be someone they look up to or someone they never want to be like. Always remember they're watching and absorbing. This deeply, deeply resonates with me. Now, it's crazy to think about it, because I remember when I was a kid and observing my parents, and there was this facade of perfection and this facade of, we know everything. We are end all be all. We are the perfect, image of what, a married couple is meant to be, or we are the perfect, in my household, Catholic, we were the perfect Catholic family kind of thing. Flash forward to 1997. No. Flash forward to 1999, 2000. When my parents' marriage unraveled and they separated, and the shockwave from people was astounding, because no one would have ever pictured or imagined that my parents were separating, because we did the vacations that we took exclusively almost were to Catholic, focused family retreats. Like, I mean, we traveled to Portugal to visit Fatima. We went on a pilgrimage to Fatima as a family with my whole family, like cousins and aunts and stuff like that. We did all these things. And in the end, it was a facade of perfection and what the image was. And it crumbled in front of everybody. Now, that was in like the early 2000s, but I can remember back to 1997 when I had started seeing the cracks. And, when you're growing up in a household, all you know is what's in front of you. And so you don't even realize until you get a little bit older, like, oh, this is not how it's supposed to be. Because there's things that you're brought up doing and you just assume everyone's doing it. But then you go to see your friends' houses, your friends' parents, and you're like, oh, this is interesting. Now, one of the things that I distinctly remember growing up was when I would observe, my aunts and uncles, or observe a friend's parents, and I would see this affection, transpire between the married couple. And I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, my parents aren't like that. Like that, and I just assumed that's how it was, that married couples weren't affectionate to each other. Like I made that assumption. I made that leap because that's all I ever saw. Now, the culmination of that, that experience growing up, having that as my example, but then seeing that is not how everyone is, as I got older, not a single part of me has any desire for any of these grand romantic gestures. I have never ever in my life thought to myself like, oh, wouldn't it be beautiful if, my boyfriend or my whatever husband, filled the pool with candles and did a romantic poolside dinner or whatever, this and that. There is no part of me that feels like that's something I would want. But again, this goes back to the root is I was never observing that. And then my parents, their marriage dissolved. And then I had to form my own idea of what a relationship is. And I'm still learning, 40 years old, I'm still learning to this day. Jen, you need to be a little bit more affectionate. It sounds crazy, but this is what I observed. So that post that I just read to all of you guys, up until I was 10, 11 years old, I had this perfect image of, what my parents were. And that crumbled before my very eyes because it was a facade. So my husband and I are very realistic with our kids. There is no facade. They get the full throttle of this is mommy and Bobby. This is how we are. And we're very open and honest with them. And, speaking of triggers just a few minutes ago, I tell them, I actually told my son because he, I could tell he gets bothered when I'm really tough on him. And I told him, I was like, look, I'm really sorry to say this to you, but your uncle used to bother me. And I'm like, so every time you bother your sisters, it makes me crazy because I think of my, your uncle bothering me. So they already know. They know that that's why mommy gets nuts because, and they'll tell me oh, yeah, because, Theo Anthony used to do this. I'm like, yup, exactly. So they're well aware of that. But being honest with your kids about who you are and, bringing them into your life and making them a part of your life versus trying to pretend you're something that you're not is going to benefit them more than putting on this facade of oh, we're perfect. We never get stressed or we're perfect. There's, money freely flowing, or, we're perfect. No one's perfect. And they need to know that because the alternative here is that they're going to grow up with this idea in their head of a false perfection that isn't realistic. And then what is that going to do to them when they become adults? What is that going to do to their lives? How far are they going to be able to go if they don't have this real solid example from you for, what the reality of things could be? I'm not saying, we're we don't overshare, we share in an appropriate fashion with them, but still it's just making sure that you have that through line to be able to tell them yeah, you know what, this is mommy and Bobby, but not everyone's like us. My girls talk all the time now about oh, they have this thing where they'll say oh, you and Bobby met in high school and you fell in love. And I'm like, no, that's not exactly right. We met when we were older. And, then my little guy struggles with the fact that I'm taller than my husband. I'm bigger than my husband. And he said it to us the one time. He was like, I don't understand. He said, I thought boys are supposed to be bigger than girls. Why is mommy bigger than you? I just am there is no, this is what it's supposed to be like. You're not, there is none of that. It really is just this is who you end up with because this is who you're meant to be with kind of thing. And it's not about your pre-existing thoughts of what you think it should be. You have to let that go and accept that you're going to receive what you're meant to receive and trust that that's going to be the right thing for you. So, a lot of mom thoughts this morning and parenting thoughts this morning around all this. So I do hope that you all had a great weekend. I am very interested, by the way, if any of you feel so inclined to send me a message, but I am interested in hearing any feedback from you guys on softening of language and not being as assertive in how you speak. I'm very curious to see if anyone else is experiencing the same thing as I am. So I look forward to hearing from you guys on that. And there'll be another episode this week keeping it same method here. No holidays this week, so I should be good to go. And I really greatly appreciate all of you listening, especially during the summer. I know it's tough. My schedule is obscene. So I greatly appreciate everybody continuing to follow along and hanging with me. When you have time, if you can leave a review for the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on, I greatly appreciate it. Again, message me, and I will see you on the next one. Take care, everybody.